Jay Bruce Fuller. Jay Bruce Fuller is a administrator and publisher with TRP out of Sam Houston State University, and the author of How to Drown a Boy, his debut poetry collection from 2024. I and welcome to have happy to have you, Jay. I Would you like to introduce yourself and say what you're working on currently?
Yeah, thanks and great to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm the director of TRP, which is the University Press here at Sam Houston State in Huntsville. And we publish up to 30 books a year of fiction and poetry and scholarship, mostly in creative writing studies and local history. So I've been in this role for 5 years. I've been at TRP for 8. So uh, I'm always busy with my day job, but also working on my next book of poems slowly, and just like everybody else, trying to balance the two.
I mean, publishing 30 books a year, that's a lot for sure. Can I ask about how TRP has grown and what you guys have won as far as some accolades along the way?
Yeah, a lot of growth in the last 5 to 8 years. Kind of a short history is that the press was founded back in the late 70s by Paul Ruffin, who was a professor here, and have been putting out books for almost 50 years now. I think we're going to hit 50 years in 2029. Um, and we came in after Paul Ruffin passed away. We came in and the university kind of like rehired all the positions and um, gave us the go ahead to grow the press. So we spent the last 5 to 8 years really expanding our number of books, signing new authors, going to conferences, traveling. So the growth has actually been quite heavy. We're getting upwards of 5,000 manuscripts a year now. Um, there, I checked this morning. There's almost 2,000 manuscripts in our queue at the moment. So if you're waiting on something, just be patient. Um, so yeah, it's kind of a victim of your success kind of thing, where all the efforts that we've made in rebuilding the press have paid off, and we've gotten some nice awards. We found out today that one of our new books won the Summerly Prize this year, Burnside Soleil, and we were on the National Book Awards long list 2 years ago. So it's been good growth and very busy. Yeah.
Nice. Heck yeah. So coming from Sam Houston State and growing this press along the way, what's the kind of the process as you're doing it? You know, you guys are basically having a slush pile of submissions, and who ends up reading them? How many review processes does it go through to break that down from 5,000 to 30?
Well, it used to be just me, but thankfully we've yeah, in the early days I did all submissions, all contests. Uh, but we have 3 full-time staff, all of whom have MFAs and or PhDs. We also train the MFA students here at the MFA program at Sam Houston State. So we usually will have anywhere from 6 to 10 graduate student interns, plus 3 or 4 undergraduate English major undergraduates that help out. Um, so they do some of the slush reading, but we also have, as part of their training, but we have assistant editors and readers kind of all over the country who are poets or novelists in their own right that um, help us with the screening, and it'll go through several rounds. Uh, Usually, it'll go through a preliminary round here at the office with our graduate students to kind of get out the stuff that's not following the submission guidelines or submitted to the wrong thing, stuff like that. Then it'll go to our readers. who will vote and make comments on it. Anything that passes that will go to our assistant editors, who will vote and make comments on it. And then ultimately, at the end of the process, I make the decisions. So
You make the decisions. Heck yeah. I love hearing that you guys integrate that with the school, as you said, with the graduate department. One thing I have heard for sure about students who are going for creative writing for undergraduate, for graduate, is coming out and not really knowing about the business side of it. How to submit, how to, like find your place. And in that respect, do you find that you guys are typical or atypical? And is that a priority to bring in the school?
yeah, it's definitely a priority because one of the biggest things that we deal with as editors at a at a press is when we deal with authors, they need to know certain things about the business that often they don't know. And these are people with MFAs, these are people with PhDs, these are professors. But so few of us are actually taught much of that in graduate school. Um, Most graduate programs have a class or two, kind of a business class, professional endeavors type class, and I had those as well. But um, what professional authors, what authors who you are fans of don't know would surprise you about things like rights, permissions, contracts, fair use, artwork, how books are even made, where, what the process is even like. So I have kind of been on I wouldn't call it a crusade, but you know, we have a list of things that we see over and over and over that we wish were being taught more as writers are being trained.
I mean, that's practical. That's, you have the art, you have the craft, but also, hey, we're also trying to sell a product. And although you have very high standards, you're doing this within an intellectual framework, let's say, the business is still there for sure. I I really appreciate that you are, integrating that into this. With other university presses, I do you find that, they're doing a similar thing? And I is the industry as a whole growing or shrinking in terms of number of titles being put out there and or sales in kind of this university press sphere?
Yeah, we're kind of a strange university press as we publish mostly uh, literary creative writing, novels, story collections, poems, poetry collections. We also have scholarly books as well, but they tend to be, we have several series that are like creative writing studies, for instance, which like is literally a scholarly series about creative writing. So that's kind of our area of expertise, which makes us very different than most university presses who may only publish one or two creative books a year or none. Um, and the structure is pretty much the same. We our books go through peer review just like a scholarly book would. Those kind of historical systems that a university press would use, we still do that. Um, but because we're doing mostly literary work, we want to be on the cutting edge of what is new, what's coming out, like who the next great voices are. So it is a little bit different for us. But I would say that amongst university presses in general, um, I think it has been over the last 5 to 10 years growing. Um, Now we're starting to see a little shrinkage with some of the politics, and there's only 120 or 140 of us on the planet. There's not that many university presses, so when one closes, it's a big deal. It's felt for all of us, so we keep an eye on it. But I would say general growth. Yeah.
Yay. And just to point this out as well, when you say other university presses only do a couple creative writing, some of them definitely have a focus on nonfiction or
Mhm.
on science.
Yeah.
And so that's often, what their focus will be. But I go to AWP. I love to see all the university presses that are out there and stuff like that. People trying to say, come to our creative writing program, handing out swag, University of Iowa, always the best swag, and trying to grow their departments. Um, it's interesting as well to hear in the news this kind of macro sense, as you said, maybe some politics, but not looking for specifics really. Um, do you see that in these budgetary concerns that universities are having these days, that that creative writing is losing its focus, or its priority, let's say, in universities in general, and also, what's the worth of it? Why is it good to keep it in the mix?
I would say, and this might surprise some people, but creative writing is an extremely popular slate of classes, and in a lot of places, the minor that most places will have a creative writing minor that is being taken by people who are majored in other things, maybe even STEM majors. And I've been at universities before where that was, well, definitely the case. It's, I think it's something that people want. Students want to take these classes. So um, what I'm seeing is a kind of a condensing of other classes like literature courses, especially like British and world literature, and older periods of literature. They're not, students today don't seem to be as interested in those things. And when I was in English majors in undergrad, I mean, you had to take the full slate of um, American, British, world, early, mid, late, you do the whole thing. I don't think that that used to be for all, that used to be core classes when I started. By the time I finished school, they had made that only for English majors, those kind of 200 level surveys of literature. So they had been shrinking since I was a student, over the last 15, 20 years. But creative writing we've seen grow, I think. Tech writing we've seen grow. These are things that people, I think, are interested in. So it gets really strange when you see, um, say, departments shrinking, um, except for this one area, or when a university combines several departments. That's been going on a lot lately, where they'll combine five, six, seven departments into one like humanities studies type department. They're doing that to save labor. You can run with two or three admins as opposed to nine admins and stuff like office space. I mean, it's very much, the university is very much a business these days, but um, creative writing, I think, is still strong, and I think that the schools that maintain their creative writing programs are going to be okay.
That's a great framework. I love the idea. One, that while some of the English department and humanities are suffering that fate of having cutbacks or being consolidated with others, creative writing is a kind of shining example separate from that. And I love to hear that, absolutely. But it's interesting to think about that a lot of these used to be core classes for everyone. You're going to biology, you do have to take 18th century British literature.
Mhm.
And when they're talking about, oh, people aren't taking this as an elective, they're not choosing to take these literature classes. Hey, you changed the framework. This was an integral part of your learning about society. You're learning how to be a human that, exists and has all these references. And you made them all electives. If you're studying biology and you haven't written a 4-page paper since, I don't know, eighth grade, ninth grade, you're not going to voluntarily go in and say, yes, I'll write, 20 pages about Charles Dickens.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our classes are intimidating to non-humanities majors because of those papers they had to write in high school, because poetry, kind of confused them in high school. But when you see creative writing, when you think I can write my own stuff, people are signing up for those. And I say all the time, I mean, they made me take biology. I take maths that I knew I would never use, the rest of my life. I took geology, like I need to know any of that. Like they should also have to take ours. I think
Yes.
I think I'm better for having taken geology, and I think they would be better for having taken, like a 20th century American lit class. Like just read Faulkner once and you'll feel better, you know.
Love this idea of the literacy changing, you know. I was having what am I thinking? The focus of universities changing for sure. And what am I thinking? I as we're getting into, 2025 and past that, uh, seeing that literacy change as students are starting to use AI to one, study, to two, turn in assignments, and three, potentially, are they even learning, to write a 5-page paper, a 10-page paper?
Yeah, when it comes to AI and the people who are um, concerned about it, there are definitely some concerns I think we should have. I've heard people talking about the literacy crisis, about people not being able to rhetorically uh, conversate or write well, and I'm not sure that I'm an expert on that at all. If I had to say though, I think that AI is going to, for one, be here the same way email didn't go away, the same way the internet didn't go away. Um, but there is this extra level of, I think, anxiety about it because it seems to be thinking and because it seems to be making people less literate. Um, I'm not sure how less literate we are and how much of that is because of AI, how much of that is because of changing culture, changing generations, how much of that is 20 plus years of internet and apps and integrated, web 3.0 or whatever. I don't know. Um, I know that we in the writing world do not want it writing poems. Uh, I've read about a slate of uh, graduation speakers this graduation season getting booed for praising AI at college graduations. It seems like the students themselves are both anxious about it, but also using it. So, so how we're using it, I think, is the conversation we need to really focus on. I think that we need AI to fly spaceships so we don't have to all get, rocket science degrees. I don't think we need more poems uh, written by written by machines or novels written by machines. Now, how humans in the middle space of that, how humans are interacting with it on a daily basis or on a literacy basis, um, I think is where most of the conversation is going to be moving forward. I hope so. Anyway, how is this affecting us, and um, is it as bad as we think it's going to be? I don't know.
Do y'all at TRP use any screening tools about AI, or like have contracts involving AI use at all?
No, we don't use AI to do any kind of editorial work.
Oh no, I mean, telling people, like either screening the things that are coming in for AI, or I contract saying, like,
No, yeah,
yes,
okay,
this
I
is
see what you're
AI,
saying.
no, this isn't.
Yes, we've had to add kind of AI clauses. I think a lot of presses have to their contracts or their paperwork. If we are, I guess, always kind of in the back of our minds afraid that an AI written book, somebody who used heavily augmented AI to write their book were to get past our kind of screening process, which is, you know, real humans with real lives. Um, and sorry, my phone's ringing. Um, what is going to happen when that first AI written book slips through the system, wins a major award, say, we really don't want to be the first press to have that happen to us. So it is on our minds quite a bit. As of right now, um, in our field, writers, creative writers, humanities majors are very, very against this. But I, as a publishing professional, just see a day when it's coming. Um, for example, uh, we're in all publishers are in the midst of many lawsuits about AI scraping our books. Authors are involved in these class action lawsuits, and so are we. Um, we're against uh, using our work to train the AIs, but almost immediately what happened, I can't remember which publisher it was, but it's a big five publisher, started just straight up letting their authors know we're going to sell this to AI companies to train their stuff. Um, and if the author agrees based on their contract, then they get a cut of it. Like this is kind of, I think, where it's going. And eventually, when Simon and Schuster or some big house, puts a AI book through to the market and it does well, then everybody else will follow. I'm kind of worried about that chain reaction there. I'd hate to have an AI section in the bookstore or for our readers to always question like, is this real or is it not real? Whatever that means. So yeah, I think we're in for a lot of interesting uh, conversations in the next I don't know, 10 years or so.
No, absolutely. And the way you're saying that, what's the first one that pops through? I admitted or not, I the rise of fanfic in the past 25 years and stuff, and the fact that a lot of people are doing things and reading things that are uncopywritten. I That's a space where, hey, does Harry Potter slash Transformers AI fanfic take off in a weird way that the controls aren't there as much because money isn't involved. I It's going to be an interesting thing. I can't say I'm gonna as you said, can't really pass judgment on it now. We're gonna have to see what happens. But I in that respect, do you think that authorship is going to change in response to, for example, if an AI can write a Stephen King novel, because it's trained on so much stuff, then is that even worth it writing like Stephen King? Or do humans now need to evolve their art form?
Well, authorship has always been more tricky a subject in all eras than I think we give it credit for. Um, and I think authors have always mind their own zeitgeist or their own culture or their own influences in their work. Some could argue that we've been doing what AI is doing just on a smaller scale. We're culling our thoughts from everything we've read, everything that we've taken in. Um, the difference is, I think, is that an author, a human author, is making choices um, in regards to style, in regards to reception, in regards to thinking of another human on the other end of this transaction, reading what they're saying. Whereas uh, large language models are just statistical. They're going to pick the next word that is most statistically likely to come up. And I'm not sure that they'll ever be able to capture that moment of choice that an author makes, where you make the choice of a word or a line break that either makes the poem good or it ruins the poem. Um, and it could be as simple as that. And the good authors make better choices more often than the bad ones. Like that's pretty
I,
much all there is to it.
I just want to step on my soapbox for a second and say this about AI and the fact that everybody's using it so much in a way that is like a therapist and it's placating, my authors, and especially when we look a little bit further back in history and see the people that really I made exemplary work for sure. I Octavia Butler, Nabokov, going back further, Tolstoy, I challenging. And so I think that this human aspect is, to not dumb it down for the reader, to not placate the reader, and to challenge them.
That being, yes, you're absolutely right. That being said, we've noticed that book lengths are getting shorter. Um, when you mentioned somebody like, Tolstoy, or you mentioned the Great Russian Masters, I mean, those books were thick, right? Like, and and there was a time, before they had television and, 24-hour news and, the NFL, that the bigger the book, the better. You had to buy it no matter what, and you could read it, take your time, you read, the whole family reads it. So like it's just in changing culture. I mean, take AI or technology out of the equation a little bit. Um, People's tastes in what they read have changed. You see it in journalism too. Long form articles are less and less. The shorter, quick stuff is more and more. That's just, I think, a reaction, or at least a an outgrowth of our culture in general. We've actually had um, meetings here at TRP where we looked at book links over the last few years, and we kind of looked at guidelines for other houses, and we lowered our word count guidelines um, because longer books aren't selling, longer books are more expensive to make, and every piece of paper in it costs money and has to be shipped, and we're paying tariffs on it. So uh, we're seeing a great reduction in book length uh, in American literature right now, um, for a lot of reasons, but attention span is definitely probably one of them.
Wow. No, I mean, over the years, they it waxed and waned, even when we look at something that's very large, going back to, what was it? Jane Eyre was written in 2 to 3 parts. Charles Dickens used to publish in the paper and then patch them all together and sell it in thirds. Victor Hugo as well. I wonder about this, if it's going to be $22, whether it's 100 pages or 50 pages, yeah, that's an interesting consideration for sure. And the consumerism of it, buying new things, I seems to be in it as well.
Well, we talked about, you mentioned earlier, the consumer. We have a bit of a problem in the book industry, at least, in that um, we can't really sell a book for more than $25 in paperback. For poetry books, I mean, you can't really go higher than 21, $22. Um, the market doesn't want to pay 35, $40 for a novel. So if paper prices are going up and shipping prices are going up, and we're paying tariffs from our printers and overseas partners, then the only way to make a book affordable is to make it shorter.
Wow. That's incredible to think about that. Like, if the market won't bear it, but your costs keep rising, your margins go to zero and then go into the red to even print a book. If that's not today, that is very possibly on the way.
No, it's today.
I
I can assure you, my budget is we've sold more books this year than we ever have, and my budget's never looked worse. Like everything is more expensive.
Yeah.
Um, and unlike other, I don't know, other products, books costs about what they cost, and they kind of rise together as an industry, and more like like an oligarchy, as opposed to I can't just charge whatever I want for the books. I can't charge uh, what it would take to make them back. So we are really not publishing as much prose, as much long prose, and that's why.
Um, in the idea of, I working at a university press, having gone through the university system, having studied writing, a lot of our writers who come to this are non-professionals. They might have gotten a degree in something else, or they might have come to writing from somewhere else, or just a passion for reading. Do you have any advice for, budding authors, people who are trying to finish their first work or trying to get something published, in terms of, practices or how to get your word out there?
Well, I will say this about um, having a degree or not having a degree. I think even writers that come out of MFA or PhD programs, we're not actually taught how to write books. We're taught how to write poems or short stories because that's what's workshoppable. And then we graduate and they're like, go publish a book. But putting together a book is, that's an art form in and of itself, switching from short stories to novels is completely different thing. So like we all are kind of put on more of an equal footing at that point in our careers, trying to figure out how to put our first books together. Um, which I think we're all in kind of the same boat at that point. Um, so my advice to any writer, but especially those without degrees, is to really focus on that book structure, you know, making sure that it's as tight as it can be, because when we have so many books to choose from, kind of any flaw in the system makes it really easy to just pass over. Uh, out of those 2,000 to 3,000 books we've got right now, two might get published,
Yeah. And that's just
maybe
statistics, like you
maybe
don't
three.
have the
Yeah,
opportunity to print anymore.
and I assure you, 200 of those books are good. Two, 300 of those books are publishable. Um, the 150 or 200 books that don't get picked oftentimes do get published somewhere else. I see books that I reject all the time get published. And we've come to equate rejection with not being good enough. Uh, but oftentimes, at least at this level, it's not having space enough, you know. And I would say the same is true for writing programs, for fellowships, for scholarships. Everybody's competing for the same one or two spots. And the top 10, the top 50 writers in that batch that don't get it are also good. So it's about just kind of like working on your stuff, working on your voice, and being ready to get lucky.
Yeah, and I love that rejection does not mean it's bad. It can just sometimes mean the wrong time or the wrong place. I find this interesting as well when agents talk about that they love this book, absolutely right in my wheelhouse. But I have another author that writes something very similar,
Mhm.
and so I can't take it on right now. 2 years earlier or behind would have been great, but it's interesting where like all these tiny decisions I can add up to what happens.
But I would say that an editor, at least me, in my case, I keep those writers and those books in the back of my head. There are several books on our list that were rejected here, uh, two, maybe even three times, and that had to do more with timing, subject matter, scheduling, uh, you know, lots of different factors that when finally all those things kind of uh, work themselves out, we take the book and it does fine. I don't know if that's comforting or not comforting to writers, but it's just kind of how it goes. Finding the right house, the right editor at the right time is part of the process. Um, so I'm always trying to tell students not to take it too personally. Doesn't mean you're not good.
I love this point as well from some authors where if you write a book, goes out on submission, you're trying to get it published, it doesn't go anywhere, fine, put it in a drawer. Work on the next one and, go through the process all over again. But if you do that, and it happens with a couple of books or something, it's very possible that a publisher or an editor or a agent will come back and say, great, we're putting this out on submission. What else do you have? And if you have a backlog of novels that you've written that are maybe 80% done because it was earlier in your career, you have something that's very close and it's possible to roll forward with that. So it's never a loss. It just, means that it might have success in the future.
I'm a poet, so the lengths that prose writers, fiction and nonfiction writers do kind of blow my mind sometimes. But very similarly, I write poems all the time that aren't any good. You know, they don't excite me. I'm not going to send them out, but I keep them in a folder. And, you know, I've had teachers throughout my career, you know, advise me to go back through there. So you didn't write it for no reason. Something in there sparked your interest, or, you know, something in there is bothering you. Something is getting worked out. There's a good line in there or a good image. And I will often take those lines or those images and start new work with, or kind of combine them with old work. So pretty much pretty similar, I think. But
Don't ever delete it. Yeah,
I would assume it's easier to just edit an 80% done novel than start a new one from the beginning, right? Like
exactly. Yeah, hell
I
yeah.
couldn't even imagine.
So working in a university, having gone through that process and had a cohort of people that you were sharing short stories and poems with, that's a built-in community. You know, you're paying to attend the university or working in kind in terms of grad students, yada yada. But I very much, Jay, respect your position as a community leader as well outside of that, and just going to poetry readings, knowing people, making connections, traveling around. Uh, what would you say the benefit of a writing community is, to an author?
I think it's maybe the most important thing. We do, if you go through a program, you do have cohorts of writers, and not all of them will go on to become professional writers. Um, but you will hopefully go to school with somebody that you trust as an artist, you trust their aesthetic, somebody that you can send poems or stories to after you graduate to get advice that you trust. I mean, that's one of the biggest things about leaving a program that I think people miss. Just the ability to have somebody else go, yeah, this one's okay, keep working on it, or to say, nah, this one's no good. You know, when it's just you and you're submittable, um, you know, it's hard to tell whether any of your stuff is good anymore. You know, and I have those moments. So if you can find two or three people that you trust as readers, that's very, very important. And then I would also say that being a part of the general larger community, going to conferences, going to readings, supporting your local bookstores and authors, um, is how a career is built. I think a lot of people think that it's publishing. Um, the books get you in the door, the books get you the job, the books get you the opportunity, sure, but being seen, being known as a person, being known as a supporter of the arts, I think does as much for your career as your CV does. I mean, when the 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 simple fact is that when people need a reader for something, or they need an editor for something, or they want you to judge they need somebody to judge a contest, they're going to think just who they know. They're going to think who they've been around, who they see a lot, who's active. And those kind of opportunities grow the more you are in kind of a community. So, I know that writers are typically introverts, and writers are typically not the kind of like party at the bar type of people, but uh, book deals get done at the bar, friendships get made at the bar, you know, after the reading, you know, when people are just standing around eating cheese and crackers. Like that's when people are having the conversations that lead to readings, that lead to publishing, that lead to magazines getting founded, that leads to, you know, all the different things in our ecosystem that we need to have an ecosystem. It can't just be book publishing, you know.
Heck yeah.
Nobody's buying the book just because we published it. Like publishers don't sell books, authors sell books. We just make them available. We do the distribution, we make them available. We do the hard part. Um, Nobody's buying a book just because TRP put it out, you know. Uh, they don't trust my aesthetic that much, I think. Like people connect with authors, you know, and and authors connect with other authors. And I think that's really how books get sold.
I think it's a great bookend to the conversation. I think it was just a couple of years ago, it was very important, which was an author platform. And the idea that, if you want to get published, if you want to do well, if you want your book to sell well, you have to be on the internet, doing social media, putting these things out there. And that feels, for one, temporary, and then for another, just kind of an extension, a subset of, the old in person, word of mouth, knowing people. Yeah.
Yeah, I go back and forth on it. I'll say that followers aren't friends. Followers don't necessarily buy your book, and that used to be some kind of gauge that people would use to offer book deals to people. They look at their followers. But I think the age of social media is waning, or at least changing. I think authors need to have those accounts and have those platforms, because it's a good way to like promote, let people know you have a new book, or let people know where you're going to be, or you have a reading, that sort of thing. But the way it was important 10 years ago, I think it's not as important now, and I think that's a good thing.
And it's a good thing. Yay. Heck yeah. You touched on it for a second, saying about going to conventions and stuff. And you definitely have been involved in terms of poetry reading, organizing events, and going to larger events and stuff like that. Do you have any advice for authors in terms of going to writing conferences or getting involved in events?
Yeah, I think, and I'll just speak for myself. As a young man, as a kid, I was so interested in books, book making, the book world, like how that, you know, happened. I spent my whole childhood in the library, that kind of thing. Um, and for me, like being a part of it, being able to go to readings or conferences, to be amongst other writers was always very important for me, because I felt like, where I grew up, I was the only person that liked reading at all, and for sure the only person that liked poetry. So to be in a room of poets, to me, is still to this day, very energizing. Um, it makes me feel like I'm a part of a, I don't know, a collective in that way. But it can be very overwhelming when you're a new writer. You're just going to show up at AWP with 20,000 other writers, and do what, like, and so there's a bit of a high learning curve there. But I think what I did when I was at that point in my career is I met one person at a time, and they know other people, and then you meet other people, and then you see them again next year, and you're just sometimes happy to see a face you've seen before, and then you become friends. And it took me for sure 10 years of going to, say, something like AWP, and building those connections. But um, I assure you that those connections have brought about most good things in my career. um, so just stick with it.
That's great. No, appreciate it. Absolutely. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to toss them in the chat. You can unmute, absolutely. But for Jay, about university presses, academia, or anything, we'd love to hear from you. Absolutely. If nothing else, I might be able to bug Shannon.
I mean, I did put a bit of a question in there, but Rhonda was kind enough to answer me because I have a knowledge
Yes,
deficit
about
about
the
what happened
Great
in the
Depression. Yeah.
previous expressions. Yeah. No, so I mean, I feel like, this has been really illuminating about how things look like on the other side. I am curious if you have experience kind of outside the academic press world, if you're seeing similar trends in other small presses or publishing houses that, you know, apologies, I've got a 5-year-old in the room that have, a focus on literary fiction, or if this is more specifically like the trends that you see in academic publishing.
No, quite the opposite. Academic publishing, I would say, is the niche as opposed to the opposite. So I got my start in book arts and the small press. Started started a small magazine when I was an undergrad, making copies at the house. Moved on and started a small press as a grad student, making handmade chapbooks and getting poems from my friends and learning how not only to make books, but you learn how to kind of edit them, you learn how to market them when it's your money, and you spent, the money at Michael's to buy the materials, you've got to make that money back. So it really taught me how to sell books. It really taught me how to do the kind of math and the forecasting. And I would say that the small press world, is where anything kind of new and exciting is going to start there. You know, I think in art, oftentimes it filters up to the big houses as opposed to the big houses discovering the next thing. Um, and I think that's probably, it's the same way in music as well as another good example. Um, so a healthy small press, I think, is essential to a healthy ecosystem overall, because we've already seen the big four used to be the big six, and there'll be the big one before it's all over, and um, that that consolidates editorial decisions and it consolidates editorial viewpoints. And the wider editorial viewpoints are, the more chance we are to discover a new thing, a next voice, or whatever, and it'll filter up from the small press. So
And then a kind of a different question, because you kind of focused in on how, your MFA and your creative writing courses don't teach you how to sell a book. I do know that some colleges have specific degrees that are like, this is a degree in publishing. For instance, I think it's the University of Denver, but Kevin J. Anderson, runs I guess it's the undergrad course on actual publishing. The thing is, he's genre fiction, which is very different than literary fiction or poetry. So just out of curiosity, have you looked into degrees that are like specific degrees in publishing versus writing? And if those are of any value, in your opinion, to somebody who is trying to become a writer in literary fiction or poetry?
yeah, there are not very many. Emerson has a master's program. The program here at Sam Houston is an MFA in writing, editing, and publishing, and the MFA students intern for 2 years with us at the press to get 2 years experience because most publishing jobs, editorial jobs, require 2 years experience, and that could be working on your student journal at your undergrad. That could be starting your own journal. That can be starting your own reading series. I mean, all of that stuff counts. But our students graduate with a kind of working knowledge of how books are made, how a press runs, and 2 years of experience under their belt. So this is one of the few ones here. And to have a publisher in the building for them to work at, is very, very helpful. Um, but I mean, do I think we need more programs like that? Yeah, because I think editing and the publishing and editing side of our field is both larger than people think, and more lucrative than people think. And we have been funneled towards teaching for 20, 30, 40 years. And I think students are often surprised to find out how many opportunities there are in editing and publishing, um, to be a real writer, to be a part of the writing world. Um, you know, I didn't grow up wanting to be a teacher. I grew up wanting to be a poet. So for me, this side of the field was definitely something that I leaned more into.
Nice. Thank
I've
you.
got kind of a dicey question, I suppose, because I believe everybody who's like either on screen and me are at least white presenting. But one of the things that, has been really uh, changing in the landscape of getting grants is the fact that if you put anything about being a person of color, being indigenous, being inside of the LGBTQ spectrum, or even being in any other sort of community that has not received representation, you will not get a grant. do you have advice for people who are trying to thrive in this, situation where the money is being funneled through people who intentionally are trying to avoid giving you a platform in order to actually be able to make it? Is there advice you have out there for people who don't meet that, white cis male set of attributes if they want to continue to be able to thrive and receive funding?
Yeah, I'm not an expert really on grants, and I've never really received any big ones. But and I'll say too that like things are really changing. Um, we went through a much needed correction period for things like race and gender, sexuality in the publishing world. I think the publishing world um, saw and made adjustments in that over the last couple of decades, which has been good. But in the current political climate, those kind of words, there's some words I can't actually say on this chat. So I'm trying to be very careful here. Um,
They're rolling back.
Understood.
I
Understood. Okay, I'll move on to a different question. This one may be just as dicey, but like when I was growing up and I grew up in Houston, Sam Houston State was considered a party school. And of course, it's been mumble number of decades since then. But are there other things that you think people would be surprised to learn about your department or the school in general that would be beneficial to authors, to writers, to people who are looking to get into publishing and are trying to figure out where to go to school?
Yeah, I don't think it's a party school anymore. At least it doesn't seem like one to me. Um, but then again, I'm not an undergrad. Actually, my youngest is about to start here next semester, so I'll let you know what he thinks. But what I was surprised by when I came here, because I had never really heard of Sam Houston, and I had heard of TRP, but didn't know much about the university it was housed at. I was kind of shocked to find out there's about 25,000 students here. It's a pretty big school, where in my home state of Louisiana, that would be the second biggest school in the state. Only LSU would be bigger than that. Like that's a massive school for most states. I know in Texas it's not, but um, it's a very big school and has a lot to offer. And as I said just a bit ago, the MFA in writing, editing, and publishing is unlike uh, really most any MFA program I can think of. Um,
Yeah, it sounds amazing. To be honest, I did not know y'all were up there doing this much. That's awesome.
so yeah, I mean, I think there's stuff worth looking into up here. We're doing it.
That's great. Well, I'm out of questions, Sean. I'm going to relinquish back to you.
That's great. We got the time. Heck yeah. My if anybody has any additional questions, my feel free to toss them in the chat. Otherwise, Jay Bruce, I'll ask you to toss your Instagram into the chats, and I'm sure if anybody would like to ask questions about TRP in the future or your work, absolutely, and you can go follow Jay Bruce over there and find out where he'll be reading next. I'm sure, absolutely.
Thanks for having me, everybody. It's been great.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right.
Awesome. Oh my, thanks for coming to Writer's Lunch again, y'all. And next week we will have Ask an Editor Hour. My talking about writing coaching. I got to remember that from just an hour ago.
Yeah. You
Awesome.
can find us on Eventbrite underneath Tomeworks Edits. You can find our Substack. We are Tomeworks. The specific newsletter that Writers Lunch is on is The Forge, but you can find us there. And we are leaving Meetup. Our technical end date is midnight tomorrow. So if you are still on Meetup, please go find us in another area because we are running away from the
And
sinking plague ship.
shitification.
Thank you so much for being our host today. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great day, y'all.